The helicopter spiraled downward through angry storm clouds, its engine sputtering like a dying heartbeat. Mark gripped the seat with white knuckles, his mind racing to his 8-year-old daughter waiting at home. Across from him, his normally composed boss, Victoria, locked eyes with him, a silent acknowledgement that this corporate retreat had just become a fight for survival. If you're wondering whether they made it out alive, you'll need to stay until the end of this incredible story. And if you're enjoying this journey of survival, connection, and life-changing decisions, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that will touch your heart and change your perspective. Mark Donovan never expected to be fighting for his life on a deserted island with Victoria Chen, the intimidating CEO of Horizon Technologies. Just 3 days earlier, he'd been in his modest apartment, explaining to his daughter Emma why Daddy had to go away for a business weekend. "But you promised we'd go to the Science Museum," Emma said, her small face crumpling in disappointment. At 8 years old, she had already experienced more loss than most children, having lost her mother to cancer 2 years prior. "I know, sweetheart," Mark said, kneeling to her level. "And we will, as soon as I get back. This trip is important." Ms. Chen personally invited the management team, and this could mean that promotion we've been hoping for. The promotion that would finally give them financial stability. The promotion that would allow him to be more present for Emma instead of juggling 3 different roles at the company. The promotion that might finally help him feel like he wasn't failing as a single parent. Emma nodded solemnly, wise beyond her years. "Will you bring me a seashell? Teacher says there are lots of pretty ones in the Caribbean." "The prettiest one I can find," he promised, hugging her tightly. Now, as the helicopter made its terrifying descent toward the turquoise waters below, Mark wondered if he'd ever see his daughter again. The corporate retreat to a private island resort had been cut short when an unexpected tropical storm developed, forcing an emergency evacuation. Mark and Victoria were on the last helicopter out. The impact was violent but somehow not fatal. Mark's military training kicked in, and he managed to help Victoria out of the sinking aircraft and onto the inflatable emergency raft. The pilot wasn't as fortunate. They watched in horror as the helicopter disappeared beneath the waves, taking with it their pilot and most of their emergency supplies. The storm's powerful currents carried them away from the resort island and toward a smaller, uninhabited one several miles away. By the time they washed ashore, both were exhausted, soaked, and in shock. "We need to find shelter," Victoria said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her disheveled appearance. Her tailored business attire, now torn and salt-stained, looked absurdly out of place against the wild backdrop of the island. Mark nodded, surveying their surroundings. "The storm's still coming. We should head inland, find higher ground." As they trudged through the dense vegetation, Mark was struck by how different Victoria seemed outside the corporate environment. Gone was the intimidating executive who could silence a boardroom with a single raised eyebrow. In her place was a woman fighting the same fear and uncertainty as him. "You have military experience?" she asked as he expertly fashioned a shelter from palm fronds and debris. "For years, before Emma was born," he replied. "Never thought I'd be using those skills on a company retreat." Victoria attempted a smile. "I'm glad one of us knows what they're doing." By nightfall, they had a rudimentary shelter, a small fire, and had managed to collect some rainwater. The helicopter's emergency kit had provided a flare gun, a basic first aid kit, and a few protein bars, not enough for a prolonged stay, but enough to give them hope. As they sat by the fire, the reality of their situation settled in. The resort knew they had gone down, but in the chaos of the storm and evacuation, it might be days before a proper search was organized. "Emma," Mark whispered, staring into the flames. "She's staying with my sister. She'll be worried sick." Victoria studied him across the fire. In 3 years of working at Horizon, she had never seen this side of Mark Donovan. At work, he was efficient, reserved, and completely professional. She knew he was a widower with a child, but beyond that, he kept his personal life private. "Tell me about her," Victoria said softly. Mark looked up, surprised. Emma? She's everything. Smart as a whip. Loves science and art. Has this laugh that can light up a room. His voice cracked. She's already lost her mother. I can't let her lose me too. Victoria nodded, her expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. We'll get back to her, Mark. I promise. The next morning brought clearer skies but new challenges. They needed food, better shelter, and a way to signal for help. Mark's military training proved invaluable as he taught Victoria how to set simple traps for small animals and identify edible plants. To his surprise, Victoria was a quick study and remarkably resilient. The woman who was known for her designer suits and cutting business acumen now waded barefoot into tidal pools to catch fish with improvised spears. You're staring, she said one afternoon, looking up from the fire where she was cooking their meager catch. Sorry, Mark said, embarrassed. It's just, you're not what I expected. Victoria laughed, a genuine sound he'd never heard at the office. What did you expect? That I'd be demanding a 5-star rescue and complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi? Something like that, he admitted. She poked at the fire. People see what you show them, Mark. At Horizon, I show them the CEO they need me to be. And what about now? Who are you showing me? She met his eyes. Just Victoria. No titles, no expectations. It's refreshing, in a terrifying, stranded on an island sort of way. As days turned into a week, they fell into a routine. Mornings were spent gathering food and water, afternoons on improving their shelter and setting up signal fires on the beach, and evenings talking by the fire. They spoke of their lives, their dreams, their fears. Mark told Victoria about his struggle to be both mother and father to Emma, about the guilt he felt working long hours to provide for her. Victoria, in turn, shared her own story, how she'd fought her way up in a male-dominated industry, sacrificing personal relationships for professional success, and how lately she'd begun to question if it had been worth it. I have everything I thought I wanted, she confessed one night. And yet I have no one to share it with. On their 9th day on the island, disaster struck. While foraging for food, Mark fell from a rocky outcrop, gashing his leg badly on coral below. Victoria helped him back to camp, her face tight with worry as she cleaned the wound with their dwindling medical supplies. It needs stitches, she said, examining the deep cut. Mark grimaced. Not much chance of that here. It could get infected. We can't risk that. She rummaged through the first aid kit, finding a needle and thread meant for repairing clothing. I've never done this before, she admitted. That makes 2 of us, Mark said, trying to smile through the pain. Victoria sterilized the needle in the fire and, with shaking hands, began to stitch the wound. Mark bit down on a stick, sweat beading on his forehead as she worked. Talk to me, she said, needing to distract both of them. Tell me more about Emma. Through gritted teeth, Mark spoke of Emma's latest science project, her favorite books, how she still slept with the stuffed otter her mother had given her. Victoria listened, asking questions, keeping him focused on his daughter rather than the pain. When she finished, she sat back, exhausted. You're an amazing father, Mark. He shook his head. I'm just doing my best. Most days it doesn't feel like enough. It is enough, she insisted. The way you talk about Emma, she knows she's loved. That's what matters. The injury slowed Mark down considerably. Now Victoria took on more responsibilities, showing a strength and resourcefulness that impressed him. She learned to maintain their signal fires, to find the best fishing spots, to keep their spirits up when rescues seemed increasingly unlikely. One evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Victoria turned to him. If we get rescued, when we get rescued, what's the first thing you'll do? Hug Emma until she begs me to let go, he said without hesitation. Then take her to that science museum I promised. What about you? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I think I'd make some changes. At work, in my life. What kind of changes? She looked at him, her expression serious. I've been thinking about what you said about balance. About being present for what matters. I've built this company, but at what cost? I don't want to wake up in 20 years and realize I've missed everything that makes life worth living. On their 14th day, Mark's wound became infected despite their best efforts. He developed a fever, drifting in and out of consciousness. Victoria tended to him desperately, using the last of their antibiotics from the first aid kit, cooling his forehead with seawater-soaked cloth. In his feverish state, Mark called for Emma, begging Victoria to tell his daughter he loved her if he didn't make it. Victoria held his hand, her own tears falling freely. You listen to me, Mark Donovan, she said fiercely. You are not leaving that little girl. You are going to fight this, and we are going to get off this island, and you are going to take her to that museum. Do you understand me? Whether it was her words, the antibiotics, or sheer determination, Mark's fever broke the next morning. He woke to find Victoria asleep beside him, her hands still clutching his. As he watched her sleep, he realized how much his perception of her had changed. The intimidating boss was gone, replaced by a woman of extraordinary strength, compassion, and vulnerability. As Mark recovered, they began to accept that rescue might not come as quickly as they'd hoped. They expanded their shelter, created more permanent food storage, and established a daily routine that gave their existence structure and purpose. They also talked more openly about their lives before the crash. Mark shared his grief over losing his wife, his fears about raising Emma alone, his struggle to balance work and fatherhood. Victoria revealed her lonely childhood as the daughter of demanding immigrant parents, her determination to prove herself in the business world, and her growing realization that success meant nothing without connection. Sometimes I look at my life and wonder if I've made all the wrong choices, she admitted one night. I've achieved everything I set out to do professionally, but my personal life is empty. It's never too late to change course, Mark said gently. Victoria looked at him thoughtfully. Is that what you did after your wife died? I had to, he said. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my future, it all changed in an instant. I had to rebuild from scratch, for Emma's sake. You did it for her. But what about for yourself? The question caught him off guard. I don't know if I've allowed myself to think that way. It's always been about making sure Emma has what she needs. And what do you need, Mark? He had no answer. On their 21st day on the island, as they were collecting firewood, Victoria suddenly stopped and turned to Mark. The question she asked next would change the course of both their lives forever. What if we've been looking at this all wrong, she said, her eyes bright with a new idea. What if this island isn't a tragedy but an opportunity? Mark frowned. An opportunity for what? To reimagine everything. Our lives, our work, our priorities. She stepped closer. Mark, when we get back, and we will get back, I want to restructure Horizon Technologies. Create a company that values balance, that understands employees have lives and families that matter. And I want you to help me do it. Me? I'm just a middle manager. No, she said firmly. You're a man who understands what truly matters. Who knows how to lead with compassion and strength. I want to create a new position, Chief of Work-Life Integration. A role that would allow you to reshape our corporate culture, to implement policies that support parents like you, that recognize the whole person, not just the employee. Mark stared at her, stunned. You're serious? Completely. This island has taught me more about leadership than 20 years in business. I've watched you problem solve, adapt, put others first even when you're suffering. That's the kind of leadership Horizon needs. And the hours? The travel? He asked, thinking of Emma. Victoria smiled. That's the best part. You'd set your own schedule. Work from home when needed. Be there for Emma's science fairs and soccer games. Show our employees that success doesn't have to come at the expense of family. For the first time since the crash, Mark felt a spark of hope that went beyond mere survival. You really think we could change things that fundamentally? I know we can, Victoria said with conviction. This island has stripped away everything but what matters most. I don't want to lose that clarity when we return to civilization. That night, as they sat by their fire discussing their vision for a transformed Horizon Technologies, they spotted lights on the horizon. A search vessel, guided by their signal fire, had finally found them. The rescue was a blur of activity, medical checks, tearful satellite phone calls to loved ones, the surreal transition from their primitive island existence to the luxury of the rescue ship. Mark's call to Emma left both of them in tears, her small voice repeatedly asking when he was coming home. Tomorrow, sweetheart, he promised. And I'm bringing you the most beautiful seashell you've ever seen. As they sailed toward the mainland, Mark and Victoria stood at the rail, watching their island disappear into the distance. Do you think we'll keep our promises? Mark asked quietly. Or will real life swallow up all our good intentions? Victoria took his hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 3 weeks ago. This is real life, Mark. What happened on that island was more real than anything I've experienced in years. I'm not letting go of that. 2 months later, Horizon Technologies announced a revolutionary new approach to corporate culture, spearheaded by their newly appointed Chief of Work-Life Integration, Mark Donovan. The press release detailed flexible work arrangements, family support programs, and a fundamental shift in how employee success was measured. Mark's first day in his new role coincided with Emma's science museum trip, rescheduled but not forgotten. As they wandered through exhibits on marine biology, Emma clutching the large conch shell he'd brought her from the island, Mark received a text from Victoria. How's the museum? Board loved your proposal. Starting implementation next week. Dinner tonight to celebrate? Mark smiled, showing the message to Emma. What do you think, kiddo? Should we have dinner with Ms. Victoria? Emma, who had met Victoria several times since their return and had taken an immediate liking to her, nodded enthusiastically. Yes. She promised to tell me more island stories. And she makes you smile, Dad. Mark felt a warmth spread through his chest as he typed his reply. Museum amazing. Emma says yes to dinner. So do I. As he put his phone away and took his daughter's hand, Mark reflected on how completely his life had transformed. A helicopter crash that should have been a tragedy had instead become the catalyst for everything he'd needed but hadn't known how to find: professional fulfillment that didn't come at the expense of his family, a renewed sense of purpose, and the beginning of something unexpected with a woman who had seen him at his most vulnerable and valued him all the more for it. Sometimes, he thought, you have to lose your way completely to find the path you were meant to follow all along. If this story of transformation and finding meaning through adversity touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Remember, sometimes life's biggest challenges can lead to our greatest opportunities, if we're brave enough to ask the right questions and reimagine what's possible. Leave a comment sharing a time when an unexpected situation changed your life for the better.